My advice for the next president of the United States.
My advice for the next president of the United States.
My advice for the next president of the United States is to take a close look at very bad policies we have regarding certain subsidies, specifically subsidies that completely distort the economy and actually harm us. We subsidize harmful things. One of the big distortions in the economy is that we have policies through tax rules, for example, that encourage and subsidize the use of debt in certain situations to fund things. For example, housing. We subsidize people to buy houses, but only if they borrow. If they borrow, they get to deduct the mortgage, but they don't get subsidy if they don't borrow. And the more you borrow, the more you're subsidized. That subsidy doesn't make sense. It doesn't even do what we want it to do, but it makes people use a lot of debt for buying houses, sometimes too much debt, inflates housing prices, and actually adds to inequality and other distortions. Similarly, we subsidize through the tax code and otherwise corporate debt. In other words, corporation to fund with debt relative to funding, for example, with equity, shareholder money. And that is, again, an incredible distortion that does nothing good for the economy, except it creates a situation in which corporations love to use too much debt than what's efficient. There is maybe a role for that, but for corporations in particular, it's entirely unnecessary to subsidize it from taxpayer so that corporations, and especially financial corporations, borrow way more than they need to and create lots and lots of inefficiencies as a result. Bad investments, we get an incredibly fragile financial system that then we have a lot of trouble regulating. And all of this because of a policy that can be easily changed, like the most no-brainer change you can have, that every committee that has looked at this has recommended, and that if you actually get thoughtful people who understand these issues and are unconflicted about the subsidies to look at it, they might come up with a bunch of proposals, even though some of these policies have been embedded and people got so used to them, they think that's natural somehow. We also subsidize, for example, sugar and not vegetables. So again, it's a subsidy that the sugar industry is loving and promoting. And everybody who gets subsidized says they're going to pass it on to somebody and it's going to do good. But, subsidies like negative taxes, we kind of encourage somebody, we give them a break, they pay less, they say some good things will happen, but we don't subsidize pollution, we don't subsidize smoking, but we have policies that are very similar to that. And so I advise the next president to examine some of these subsidies.